they edit it and they put it together and they ask you questions that maybe you don't want to answer.
Right.
And they put things together that you're saying, and I'm a fucking dumb guy. I get confused and shit. So they were asking me about a whole bunch of things at the same time.
Well, they were asking you about Louis C.K. and Roseanne. Now, Roseanne was someone who gave you one of your first breaks in
my
show
very
business.
first job, yes.
You were actually writing
I
on
love Roseanne, yes.
And Louis is a friend of yours.
Louis is, the greatest comic there is.
And in the defense of them, somehow you got to this point where you said,
well,
hey.
It wasn't really a defense of them. They asked me, what do you think of Roseanne, and what she did, and how she's doing. That's what they asked.
Yes.
Because I've been in touch with her.
Yeah.
So the day it happened, I phoned Roseanne because I know Roseanne, and she was crying and she was so, upset and heartbroken. I felt so bad. And so I said, I don't know what to say to you, Roseanne, because I've never been through this, And I said, let me ask a friend of mine that's been through this. And I was talking about Louis C.K. Yeah. Now, Roseanne had been really hard on Louis C.K.
Yes, when he was in his controversy, she blasted his ass.
And this was before he got, written up.
Yeah.
She said, she named him. She said, fucking Louis C.K. is doing a lot of bad things. So,
so you had the idea that they should talk to one another.
Louis did. I talked to Louis, and I said, I was worried about Roseanne. Because I talked to her for 2 hours in a row. I was just crying the whole time. And I was like, I'm kind of worried about Roseanne. She's not the strongest person mentally.
Right.
And Louis said, I think...
But real bad sexual abuse.
I do too.
Rape, everything.
Yes.
And they go through...
It destroys their life.
They're never the same.
Oh, of course
their whole bodies shake at the thought of it. Some of them even black out when they think about this thing. It's horrible. So
I know that. And of course, you'd have to have Down syndrome.
Not to know that.
My new word.
Down syndrome. Right. That's a good word.
You'd have to have Down syndrome to not feel sorry for, of course, Me Too is what you want for your daughters. You know what I mean? And you want that to be the future world, of course.
Right.
And I meet all kinds of women that have the terrible stories, about what's happened to them. But I wasn't talking about the victims. I was talking about, they asked me about Roseanne. They asked me about Chris Hardwick. They asked me about Louis. And I told them, like if someone murders someone, and goes to jail, right? And then he gets out of jail after 10 years. And you go, I'm going to give this guy a job washing dishes because he's done his penance.
Right.
Nobody goes, well, what about the people he murdered? Well, of course, they had it off worse,
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the murderer. Give him a dishwasher job,
So do you think that the writer somehow merged all of these thoughts into one thing? Or do you feel you were quoted inaccurately? Or do you feel like you were treated fairly?
Well, I don't know. The original writer was for The Hollywood Reporter.
Right.
And he wrote it. And that wasn't the headline.
Right.
And so I don't know if he even noticed or anything. And then another place called Vulture, which is a WW computer.
Yeah.
They wrote, Norm Macdonald defends Louis Anderson.
Louis C.K. Louis C.K. You can't defend Louis Anderson. What did he do?
I defend, it says, in the headline, Norm Macdonald defends Louis C.K. and Roseanne Barr. And I never defended them,
I've been searching for what's missing, but the answer...
Norm Macdonald has become a huge hot topic over his comments about Roseanne and Louis C.K. and the Me Too movement. And it led to The Tonight Show, saying that we're going to cancel the appearance, but we wanted him to come and clear the air. So please welcome Norm Macdonald. You took a lot of flack for saying in the art of, for some things that you said in The Hollywood Reporter, saying that you were kind of glad that the Me Too movement has slowed down, and we don't really know you as a guy who really comments on very much. That's gone out. So were you what were you trying to say?
Yeah.
Well, I was, print reporters, they ask you questions and then put them all together. What I was talking about was Chris Hardwick, this particular comedian.
Right.
That was a friend of mine. And, if 500 women go against a man, obviously the guy's guilty. But then the Chris Hardwick one, it was one woman against one man.
Right.
So I was saying that I thought it was good that the pendulum was slowing, and Chris Hardwick has been as rehabilitated as he's going to get. He still tells me he can't walk down the street without people yelling stuff at him.
Yeah.
But that's all I was trying to say.
Okay. Well, you do raise valid questions about due process and verification of what went on. I think that we would agree with that. That you have to back it up somewhat. But when you kind of lose me when you imply that the hardship that your friend Louis C.K. is a friend of mine too. Really, I know him a long time. That the hardship that he went through is equal to the hardship that the victims went through.
Right.
That doesn't compute.
No, it's not
Can
true.
you explain yourself a little there?
Yeah, no, that's not what I was saying. When this happened, I was working for Roseanne when Roseanne's thing went down, and I called her the next day, and she was crying the whole time I was talking to her.
Right.
I've known Roseanne for a while, and I was worried about her because she seemed really, really in a bad place. And I said, I can't really talk to you about this because I've never been through anything like this. And I said, I know Louis, and he's been through this, where he's had everything taken from him.
Right.
And I said, not many of us have gone through this, and so you should talk to each other because and then the guy said, what about the victims? And I said, well, the victims haven't gone through this. I was talking about this particular event. Of course, the victims have gone through worse than that, but
Right.
I'm going to get a victim to phone Roseanne?
No, but that's a good clarification.
And that's why it's so important to be able to
Right.
clarify and to be able to explain, because at the heart of it, I think we are forgiving people. We jump very quickly today, but I do think that we like to forgive. You went on the Howard Stern show yesterday to apologize, and you ended up making it worse because you said you'd have to have Down syndrome not to feel sorry for the victims.
Yes.
Do you regret
just
saying
keep on
that?
getting into trouble, Norm Macdonald.
It's always bad when you have to apologize
For the apology?
an apology. The,
Do you lose it when you're on Howard? Is that what happens, Joe?
well, there is
little
a
bit?
thing on Howard where there's a recklessness in the studio, and there used to be a word we would all say to mean stupid that we don't say anymore, right?
Yeah.
You know
We're
the word I'm
talking-
talking
yes,
about?
yeah.
Yes. And stupidly, I was about to say that word,
And you put this.
and I stopped and said, "What's the right word to say?" And then I said a different word that was equally.
Yeah.
Did you realize in that
offensive.
moment that probably
I
offended a lot of
realized
people?
at that moment that I'd done something unforgivable.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's like things spill out sometimes, and it's just difficult. You also you're friends with Roseanne. She gave you your first job, I
Yes, I did
understand.
my first job
And so you put her together with
Louis.
with
C.K.
Louis. Yeah, because I was really concerned about Roseanne, and I don't want someone to end up killing themselves or anything.
Of course not.
Yeah, so
Don't you think Louis, do you say that you think they deserve a comeback? Now, I was saying yesterday that Louis performed at Comedy Cellar, and what he didn't talk about these allegations in his set, which I would have thought that he would have done. Don't you? I mean, so if he wants to have a comeback, he needs to address it directly, I think, as a comedian. So where's Roseanne's coming back?
geez, I don't know if Roseanne could ever come back.
Are you worried to speak now because of the backlash that you've received this week? Now are you thinking twice before everything comes out of your mouth?
He always talks
Seems
like
that way.
This is how he's a slow talker.
He talks like
Yeah.
that.
But I
He's
think
a
just
slow
in general,
talker
I
in
think in
America.
general we all have to think very carefully about the words that come out of our mouth because you risk offending somebody or a number of people.
Right.
Well, Joy's often said that PC, political correctness, is killing comedy.
It is killing comedy.
Do you
to a
agree
large
with that?
extent.
Yes,
Even
I
in the
agree with
clubs
that
where it's a
because-
small group.
Well,
You
as
know,
long as there's a video.
often people will come and say, some guy said a joke and you're asked to defend it,
Yeah.
and the joke is always horrible. Like it's the worst joke you've ever heard.
Yeah.
And you're in this position where you have to defend a terrible joke on free speech, you know. But I always, like, reporters always ask you, like, what's offensive? Is anything over the line? And I personally think almost everything is over the line.
They like you to be edgy, and then when you are, you get hurt for it.
Right.
But you know, comedians.
But
are
I will
trying-
say the remark I made about people with Down syndrome was just a
Insensitive.
terrible,
Yeah.
terrible,
and
terrible
stupid.
thing for me to
We
say.
agree.
Well, all of this is happening,
Yeah.
you know,
Well-
and we also, you know, we've all stepped in it as comics.
Yeah.
We all have stepped in it as comics.
And as lawyers
And as-
and as journalists.
Maybe, but not quite the same way.
Not quite the same. But
Yeah.
let me
But-
ask you.
go ahead.
Sorry, Webb. You know, your appearance on Jimmy Fallon was canceled. And he said that his staffers were actually crying about the comments that you made. Were you surprised at that reaction? And
Weren't
have
they
you been
crying that
surprised
you were there? They were crying that he was there.
that you were even there? Have you been surprised by this reaction?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, yeah, I have been surprised because, you know, I never did anything. I mean, I spoke, but I mean, I don't want to be tossed in with people that actually did,
Right.
not crimes, but sins, or, you know, I barely have consensual sex.